For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. These words, spoken by Jesus in the Gospel of John, introduced a promise that would change the course of history, the promise of eternal life. Imagine the enormity of this revelation, its profoundness radiating through every syllable. A promise not just of a life beyond death, but a life made eternal through faith. Imagine the impact of such a promise on the people of that time. Now picture the scene. Ordinary folks, fishermen, tradesmen, mothers, fathers and children, hearing this good news. Imagine yourself standing amongst these humble people, the sea breeze rustling your robes, the smell of fish and salt in the air. Suddenly, a man, Jesus, speaks of a promise, the promise of eternal life. To the ears of these common folk, it was like a fresh wind blowing through the spiritual landscape of their lives. This promise was new to them, not because they hadn't yearned for such a thing, but because it was so radically different from their current understandings. They were used to the idea of life being finite, with death marking the end of one's journey. But this was a whole new perspective. For them, it was revolutionary. It was a promise that shattered the accepted norms of their spiritual understanding. It was a promise that broke the shackles of mortality and opened up vistas of eternal life. In the face of this promise, the common people found something they'd perhaps never had before: hope. Hope for a life beyond the mundane, beyond the struggles and hardships they faced daily. Hope for a life that was eternal, just as Jesus had promised. They were not scholars or philosophers, but they understood the magnitude of this promise. They understood its implications, and they embraced it. This was more than just a promise, it was a revolution of hope and faith. But not everyone was ready for this revolution. The religious leaders of the day had their own reactions. The promise of eternal life, as revealed by Jesus, was a shockwave that rippled through the religious community. It was a message that was radically different from what they had known and taught. The Pharisees, the religious elite, and the keepers of the law found themselves at odds with this new teaching. They held tightly to their traditions, their rituals, and their rigid interpretation of the Scriptures. This promise of eternal life, this good news, was seen as a threat to their authority, their influence, and their understanding of righteousness. The Sadducees, who denied the resurrection and the afterlife, were also confronted with a promise that challenged their beliefs. They found themselves grappling with a message that spoke of life beyond death, a concept they had rejected. The good news was indeed a challenge to the status quo. In the midst of this, Jesus introduced another profound concept: being born again. As recorded in the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verses 4 to 8, Jesus had a notable conversation with a man named Nicodemus. He was a Pharisee, a religious leader, and he struggled to understand this concept. "Can someone be born when they are old?" he asked. Jesus explained that being born again wasn't about a physical rebirth. Instead, it was about a spiritual transformation, a fresh start, a new beginning. It was a call to leave behind the old ways of thinking and living, and to embrace a new way of life, one centered on faith and love. This concept was intrinsically linked to the promise of eternal life. For to be born again was to accept the gift of life that Jesus was offering, a life that was not limited by physical death. Being born again was not just a metaphor, it was a call to a new way of life. Then came the ultimate proof of the promise: Jesus' resurrection. This monumental event sent shockwaves through the society of the time. Just as dawn breaks the night, the resurrection shattered the prevailing spiritual darkness, illuminating a new path to eternal life. The empty tomb wasn't a mere symbol. It was tangible evidence of the promise fulfilled, a physical affirmation of the spiritual truth Jesus had proclaimed. Imagine the awe, the disbelief, the hope that must have surged through those who first saw it. The resurrection wasn't just an event, it was a revelation, a testament to the power of faith and the reality of eternal life. This revolutionary understanding shook the very foundations of their spiritual beliefs, forever changing their perception of life and death. The resurrection was, and still is, a beacon of hope, an affirmation of the good news Jesus shared. The empty tomb was not just a symbol, it was evidence of a promise fulfilled. But what does this promise mean for us today? In a world that is continually evolving, the promise of eternal life remains a beacon of hope for many. It serves as a reminder that life extends beyond the physical realm, echoing the beliefs of the fishermen and tradesmen 2 millennia ago. This promise, shared by Jesus on the shores of Lake Galilee, continues to be good news for millions today. Just as the common people and religious leaders of Jesus' time grappled with this revolutionary concept, we too are challenged to understand and accept it in our own lives. The promise of eternal life encourages us to live with kindness, compassion and faith, just as it did for the followers of Jesus. In our world, where change is the only constant, the enduring promise of eternal life offers stability and comfort. We continue to find solace in the words of Jesus, just as those who came before us did. The promise of eternal life continues to be good news for millions today. So we come to a final question. Pause for emphasis. Is having the offer of eternal life? Well, is this good news to you? Let it sink in. Let it resonate. This question isn't just about an ancient promise made on the shores of a distant lake. It's about you, right here, right now. It's about what you believe and what you hope for. As you ponder this, remember the promise, the revolution, and the hope it brought to the world.